This is the Good Neighbor Podcast, the place where local businesses and neighbors come together. Here's your host, Jeff Gardner.
Welcome to another episode of the Good Neighbor Podcast. Today we have another good neighbor on, Sue, Carr, Community Healthcare Consulting, CHC Consulting. Sue, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jeff. I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great conversation. It was a pleasure to meet you the other day at the networking event, but I made sure to not ask too many questions, as it's the first thing I want to do when I meet somebody. Just immediately dive into their story. I wanted to save it for this. So I am pretty much like an audience member, knowing little, which I like being in that space. So let's start right from the top. What is CHC Consulting? What do you do, Sue?
Basically, I work with organizations who are experiencing challenges with hiring, keeping staff, productivity issues. Basically, work with the team to develop more of that cohesive collaboration, getting that connection, that sense of belonging to the organization, so that people can feel that they're actually contributing to their work, and it's adding to their joy, their values. They can see how their piece fits into the bigger whole. They're happy, they're satisfied, and for the employer, productivity goes up, retention goes up, absenteeism goes down, all of that good stuff. So the company's, better off financially, and people are feeling happy at work, not dreading having to go to work on the horrible Monday mornings or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that's in a nutshell. That's what I do.
I love it. So needed in this in our Western world of such high productivity and capitalism being a driving force to our existence. So business is a major driver of so many positive things, some negative things, but when a business is done right, it can really be a machine for a positive impact. So efficiency, bringing up the quality of our experience within that business, bringing up profitability, all of these efficiencies leading to things like new research and development, so we can create better products and have a better impact. But if you could give me like the Coles Notes on what does that look like? So does a business reach out to you and say, we're a mess, please help? Or what does it look like for you to go in there and do that?
It doesn't have to be quite a mess, but yes, businesses do have to connect to me and sort of say, I think we could be better. And that's basically the bottom line, is because, my focus is around psychological health and safety, but people don't really understand what that term means. But basically, it's having people happy and engaged in work. Everybody knows what health and safety regulations are. Don't work at heights, and safety training around that, and don't drink liquid paper, and all of those kinds of things around WMIS and stuff. But there's also a comparable set of standards around health, and like the mental health and the psychological health of the workplace. And that's the area that I work with. So, how is the communication going? How is the leadership going? And what can we do to make it better? Obviously, staff turnover and staff retention is on a hot button for almost every employer out there. Finding and keeping staff is probably the biggest challenge right now. So what can you do in your workplace to help people feel more involved and engaged? Because, as we all know, the saying is so true. You don't leave the work, you leave the boss or the coworker. And that is so true today, and more so, I guess, in our post-pandemic life than even before. People are a lot less tolerant with putting up with in areas where they don't feel valued and supported. So that's what I do, is how do you make people feel valued and supported? Obviously, without, not everybody's going to go on an incentive trip to the Caribbean, but what can you do that's going to be a little bit, smaller scale? Few little changes in how things are done and how people communicate with each other, and how people really treat each other with respect. And those are the things that I work with to get people to really see how they belong in their workplace and grow and develop. And that's what we're all about. That's what our human needs are.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's interesting. We're a person, at least from my experience, we have our version of ourselves outside of work. We have our version of ourselves inside of work. We have our version of ourselves inside our family, so many different versions. And that has made things confusing for me, especially in my younger years, in my 20s. I was very lucky to come across some great mentors. Some of them are still in my life, and they really taught me to do the work internally on
Mhm.
myself, to get to know myself at a much clearer and increase my own self-worth, my own self-value. And then through that, one of the results was kind of the same individual going to different places rather than going to different places and changing my personality or my wants or my needs, things that align with me. And what happened, at least one of the things when we're talking in regards to work, was I was working a job that I didn't seem interested in it. I couldn't kind of see the forest through the trees type of thing. I was just going there as a means to an end.
Right.
But as I started to change my relationship with myself, what I valued now changed. My priorities now changed. And I then learned to use my current work to be a avenue for growth in these areas, which increase the quality of my work. And most importantly for me is the enjoyment of my work. So I always thought it was, I have to change my environment. I have to change my work. I have to get this thing to enjoy life more. But
Yep.
really it was the opposite for me. I needed to learn to enjoy myself more, which brought up the quality of all these extra areas. So I love that you're teaching that to some regard. At least that's how I interpreted it. These interpersonal relationships within that environment,
Yep.
showing them how they could grow as an individual, how they could grow as a cohort,
Yep.
and really derive a lot of value out of wherever they are.
Absolutely. Yeah. You nailed it. And things like leadership and emotional intelligence all play into that. So there's, pieces of that that we weave in, and no organization is the same. So everything that I do is customized
Mhm.
to that group. And yeah, it's always fun to see people sort of evolve and grow, and have those moments of insight.
Yeah, so I mean, to a certain degree, you're kind of like a work therapist. You go in there, you change mindsets, you help evolve relationships, and kind of teach them how to create a more positive environment for people to enjoy and look at work maybe as so many of us, we talk about the word work all the time. I
Yep.
think in societal terms, not always. I don't want to broad strokes everything, but I think there's a large group of people that look at work as something I have to do rather than I get to do it. I have to do it because I have to pay these bills to live the life that I want. And you know what? If it works out for them, great. But
Mhm.
the people that are my role models in my life, people that I consider of excellence, they're doing rare things. There's not a lot of them out there doing that. The people that I follow, if it's pretty simple the way they say it. If I'm going to do something 8 or 10 hours a day, that means it's
Yep.
one of the things I do more than anything else in my life outside of like breathe and sleep.
Yep.
So it's a huge part of my life. It's going to become a huge part of my identity. I get to do this because I'm in this environment, and why not turn this into a beautiful experience? I don't know that that's the common mindset. So to help us get there is an incredible thing. Could you imagine if all of Canada was jumping up out of bed to get to work in the morning? What our economy, what our workplace would look like, what our mental health would look like. So I love that you do that. Yeah, you're kind of like a work therapist, it seems.
I don't like to use the term therapist because
Sure.
I do have a background in mental health, and what I do is not therapy. It is
Okay.
a very specific thing, but I do, you're getting at the gist of it is that transformation of helping people. And when we talk about work, I also work with like groups of volunteers. I've worked with sports organizations. So anytime that you're getting a bunch of people together to work to achieve certain outcomes, and something that's productive, that's a great way of looking at it. And looking at the stats prior to the pandemic, there was the World Health Organization actually had listed workplace stress as an endemic issue in industrialized nations. The number of people who are off on disability from work related stress, missing absenteeism, and all that stuff, it was really becoming a big issue. And that was even before we had the pandemic. So now it's just added to it. So the more we, as you say, like 8 hours a day or more you spend, your waking hours, best part of your waking hours at work. So why not find ways that it's going to fill you up and enjoy it? Doesn't mean you're going to love all parts of it, absolutely. But overall, like, do you feel that work is meaningful to you? And achieving something of value that matches your values. And as you say, as you change your values and grow up and develop all of that, who am I as a person, you start to really understand what's important to you, and then how do you find, the right place to fulfill that and make money so you can, afford your groceries and your gas and your housing and all of that other stuff that we need to be comfortable in our current manifestation of life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting when you bring up the money part. For so long, it made sense to me that if money is what I want, for whatever reasons, I had my reasons to focus more on money and the accumulation of money. That made sense to me that I would probably make more. Whatever you focus on grows to a certain extent. But with money, it's kind of paradoxical a little bit. I found the more that I focused on it, the more wanting I had, the more taking I was trying to do. And it just seemed like I was building this wall in front of me that I couldn't quite see, but clearly was hitting. Whereas when I stopped focusing on the money and I started focusing on quality of life, on enjoyment, on deriving value wherever I am, all of a sudden the money just started coming, like in a much bigger way than I expect. And it's like, oh, okay, if you're just a good person and you treat people well and you try to enjoy your experience, this attraction, people start working with you a little easier, starting wanting to collaborate with you more. And you get recognition and you get promotions. And it's interesting in that way. Once I didn't stop thinking about money entirely. I do like to keep my eye on it when you're running a business, but it's way down the priority list now. And that has been a much better formula for me to become more profitable. Is just really quality of life is the top priority for me in any setting that I'm in. And I think if you're enjoying what you do, I just think it just goes better across the board, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely.
I love it, Sue. So I'm very interested now. We could probably just talk about this one thing because I'm thinking about how you could help our organization because it seems like mindset is a big part of what you do. I'm probably many more things, but to me, mindset is one of the most critical barriers for many of us. Like, what are we capable of? And then how far beneath that is our mindset stopping us? And to me, in the fitness world, in the business world, it seems like there's quite a gap there. So to increase the mindset to get close to our capability is amazing. So I could talk to you about this all day, but what I want to get into is the story behind it. I find human beings just fascinating, and the storytelling aspect of the way we communicate, we can resonate with your journey in some way. There's probably going to be a few things that's like, wow, that sounds similar to my journey. But what brought you into, I like to ask two questions because at the end of the day, you're an entrepreneur and that is hard. You've chosen a hard path and it's a rare path. I read this study. It's a few years ago now, but I believe it was somewhere along the lines of 1 in every 75 people is an entrepreneur. So whether, plus or minus 10, something like that, entrepreneurs are rare compared to employees. And I would argue that to a certain extent, running your own business is a little bit harder than being an employee of one. So I believe entrepreneurship is very difficult. So why did you do that? And second, what brought you into the world of helping? Like, you're a business in and of itself. You run your own business. What made you say, I want to go help businesses be better businesses, essentially? What brought you to that? It's an interesting career.
It's actually the same story that builds those two pieces together. So my background, my history is I spent well over 30 years in healthcare. Almost all of that was in adult mental health care. So that's why I'm a little concerned around, people using therapy,
Yep.
and it's not quite an exact clear.
No, I'm glad you corrected that because I don't know those terminology like you do.
So 30 years in healthcare, most of it in mental health. The last few years, I was in palliative care. Again, both of those were very challenging career paths, very rewarding, but also very challenging for a whole bunch of issues. Not so much the client care side of it, because that's the easy part. It's all of the other stuff that goes around it. You know, all of the rules, regulations, the ministry fundings, the hoops you have to jump through,
Hmm.
all of that kind of stuff. So it's a challenging field. And fairly early on in my career, when I was still doing the direct service side, I had a couple of very close colleagues, um, both of whom were fantastic in their clinical skills. They were, above the average, definitely, exemplary in that field, in that area, but they didn't cope with workplace stress very well. And both of them ended up choosing some rather unhelpful coping mechanisms and ended up becoming addicted to narcotics. Not unheard of in the healthcare field. Unfortunately, it is one of the higher stress areas and does tend to um, have people cope in ways that they know aren't very helpful, but you fall into it, and then next thing you know, you're in trouble. And how do you get out? So that's kind of the big driving force behind the why is that was a really good eye opener in that people who are great in also so many areas and have family support and everything, and they still end up not being able to manage effectively. So that was kind of something that as I moved through the supervisory and leadership roles within the sectors, really took to heart, making sure and checking in that the staff that I had in my organization were the best that they could be at that time, and that the workplace stress, because there's always workplace stress, but that there was things in place to help them manage the best they could, and if they couldn't, that there was ways and supports to get the support they needed at that time. So I became very much interested in things like compassion fatigue, moral distress, secondary trauma, all of that sort of stuff that's kind of specific to healthcare, social services, and that those fields. And then later on, started doing a lot more research into the psychological health and safety under the standards that were put up by the Mental Health Commission of Canada and supported by a number of different organizations. So that's where I got the additional training. And then lo and behold, as things happen, after running, a number of organizations over the years, the one that I was with at the end merged with another organization. So I became, as I refer to it, employment liberated. Other people may call it laid off. I call it employment liberated.
I
Um,
like that.
so that's where I sort of sat back and thought, okay, well, you don't need two leaders in one organization. So I was the one that was found to be, redundant, and sort of sat back and thought, okay, well, at this point in my life, do I go back and try and find another organization and go through this all over again, or do I try and do something different and really focus in on my specific passion around workplace wellness, workplace stress management, and building that culture and those systems that support people to be their best, whether it be in healthcare or other areas. And that's where the community healthcare in my name came from. Is I was initially focused on the healthcare social service fields, and have since decided that I need to be broader than that, because workplace stress happens in so many more areas than just healthcare. So I am in the process of rebranding my name, but it will still be CHC Consulting. So that's my why. That's my passion, is trying to help people, not have work make them sick in the bottom line, but also how can you be more productive, more effective, and feel that you're part of something bigger in your work, that you're accomplishing something. So whether that be somebody working at Honda and they're, riveting on the line or doing some task, they are actually contributing to building a car. And that
Mhm.
car can, help people get to their work, their families. I know that they're looking at becoming a electric car now, so adding into the environmental concerns. So you're still part of something, even if your job is just very basic and very small. It's contributing to something bigger that has value and has meaning. And you could be like a top level lawyer or judge, and you're contributing to the society, the greater good in other ways. So how do you build on those pieces and actually love what you do? For the most part, obviously, there's going to be parts that you hate, like bookkeeping and social media and stuff that you just don't like doing, but you have to do.
Yeah, I love that. Meaning, that's something that very passionate about. I would consider it a practice of mine or a study. What is meaningful to me, and what is the impact of understanding meaning to an individual? And can we derive meaning from just about everything? I would argue, yeah. That line worker that's dealing with the rivets, there's two different people go into that work each day. Let's say one person is, I just got to do these things and take as many breaks as I can to kind of
Yeah.
do the least amount of work possible, get out of here, go see my husband, go see my wife, whatever, and get back to the TV. So that's one example. Not everybody's, of course, but then somebody else is telling themselves before they go to work, like, I am helping, I'm a cog in this machine that's having a great impact. I can be proud of my work, et cetera, et cetera. Not only that, but I can be a role model for my other colleagues. And for me personally, and I've met many people, especially in my sphere, that would agree to this. When you feel like you're a part of building something that you deem important,
Yeah.
it's unbelievably motivating and unbelievably fulfilling, no matter your role, because this whole idea of my role is smaller than your role, you're higher than me, kind of washes away when you're a
Mhm.
part of this team creating something. I use the house analogy. Like, you take 10 people, you put a house together, somebody's doing the roof, somebody's doing the driveway, somebody's doing the windows. There's no hierarchy to it. It's just simply we are all doing our part to build this thing, which will now house a family, which you can create a life in. And if I find the deeper you go to that, eventually you find yourself connected to the whole world. If you keep going,
Mhm.
your impact ripples out across the entire globe. And, who knows how many years or decades or centuries your work will affect the people coming forward. So when you can really start to understand your impact as a human being doing what you do, I have found it to be incredibly motivating and fulfilling. And certainly the people that I speak to about this idea that align with it agree in that regard. So I love that you're out there helping them understand that. And I love how your story kind of evolved from one thing to the next to the next to bring you here, um, helping increase the quality of people's work existence, which will certainly change the quality of their existence as a whole. Something that I'm always curious about, though. So it seems like you were able to identify and easily see the kind of leaky holes in the boat when you're at these organizations. Okay, there's stress that is the result of this, that is the result of X. I want to help people move through these things. Now, do you treat your own situation in a similar regard? Because what I have found, the most effective people that help us with mindset or really anything, they are practitioners of it in a big way.
Mhm.
I'll give you a small example. For me, eventually to become a fitness trainer, which I did for a long time before helping businesses scale, fitness is the foundation to my life, certainly. I was answering my own health challenges. So I went to a fitness trainer to get my goals achieved, whatever they were. And then I learned skills along the way that I continue to practice that now can help other people. So have you found that you've learned these things that you've implemented in your own life to increase the quality of your life and decrease your stress and now help others with it? Is that kind of, because it seems that way. You're very jovial. And every time you talk about what you do, you have this big smile on your face. So you can see the passion there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things that I reflected on as to why I was able to handle my stress a little better than some of my colleagues was my connection with my horses. So
Mm.
I work with horses, and From time to time, I actually do corporate retreats with horses. It's not the focus of my business today, but it was definitely in there in the earlier stages. Horses have a way of reflecting back to us our own stress and our emotional mindset. And you can't hide it from the horses like you can from people. So I had to continuously get that feedback and get that check onto where am I mentally and emotionally and energetically with my own well-being, and then learn how to manage it. So yeah, so when I'm not doing this kind of stuff, I am sort of focusing on my horses and my work with horses and in getting that feedback and that dialing into my stress level and where things are at. So yeah,
I
and then
cannot tell
also
you.
throwing in a little bit of mindfulness and self awareness practice. Not quite meditation, but definitely some mindfulness activities that I do that kind of help get me grounded and focused. Absolutely.
I love it. I love it. Well-being, such. I'm glad there is. It's becoming much more of a topic of conversation. Our emotional intelligence, passion. What do we actually want? What does the body and mind actually need? But I cannot tell you how many times on this podcast, and certainly at the recovery facility on the weekend, how often I hear about this incredibly deep connection with animals. I have not been able to identify all of what it is. Of course, there's many things that I'm ignorant to, but I've certainly found that animals are authentic. There is no mask,
Yeah.
and they are great feelers. I certainly think there are very emotional, um, sentient beings, and there's just this relationship with all my insecurities and all the crap that I carry around. I go and see my little chubby pug, and it seems to just know exactly what to do, know exactly how I'm feeling, and it just elevates the moment. Now, I have very little experience with horses, although I have a great love for animals. And there's a number of people in my little sphere that the way they speak about horses, I mean, there's my spiritual hour. I'm going to go be with my horse, or my therapy for the day. I'm going to go be with my horse for an hour. And what do you do with the horse? It doesn't matter. I could just be brushing it. I could be riding it. We could just be walking. It's amazing. We have no verbal real way to communicate with them. And it seems unnecessary. You communicate in all of these different ways with these animals. And to hear you say that, just, I look for common threads
Yeah.
amongst people that I want to learn from. And when you've met, 200 people that you revere in some way, and 180 of them are talking about the value that they've derived from the connection with animals, it's like, okay, I get the point. Find a way to connect with animals, because you're missing something if you don't. So I
Yeah.
love that. I think it's fantastic. And I wasn't expecting that. Um,
Yeah.
but
There's
it's
a lot
amazing.
of hard science behind how animals, being in the presence of animals, release certain chemicals within our brain that help us change our mindset. So there's the experiential side of it. There's the word of mouth, but then there's also the hard science behind what happens in our heads and how we deal with things. So definitely spend time with animals, even if you don't have a pet. Go borrow one.
Yeah, that's it. No, it's great. Okay. So, as I was talking about in the pre-show, if we can provide quality education, who knows what can happen, right? It has the opportunity to increase the quality of somebody's life and have great impact on our community. And we talk about myths and misconceptions. I think across every category out there, you pick one, there's going to be some false information that was passed from him to her over time. And now it's in my brain, and I'm making decisions based on suboptimal information. I use the seatbelt analogy as one. We've seen the difference from learning about driving a car without a seatbelt, inaccurate information, or suboptimal, to now driving a car with a seatbelt. Obviously had a massive impact, and there's a million examples of it. So are there any myths or misconceptions out there about what you do that somebody may be having implanted into their mind right now that we could clarify for them?
Sure. One of the big myths that I get from employers is that they're losing staff because staff are going to another organization for a higher wage. I sit in a number of tables in the Barrie area, and employers are always saying, "Oh, well, this person left because they can get an extra dollar an hour or an extra 50 cents an hour at my competitor." The truth is, statistically across all of North America, and it's been researched by Gallup, Harvard Business Review, like all of those big names, and across North America, people do not leave their jobs for money at all. The one exception is if you're at an organization that is playing below the benchmark for your industry or for your service. If you are below at benchmark, yes, people will leave. But even with the rising cost of gas, housing, people are not leaving their jobs to go and get more money. People might be telling you, their employer, that they are doing that because it's a lot easier to say, I'm going to get more money out of this other place, instead of saying, because my boss is a pain in the butt, or because my coworker and I are just constantly at heads, and every time I go into work, I just dread having to see this person. That's why they will leave. They will probably tell you it's for money because it's a lot easier. Or, I did all this work and you never said thank you. Another big reason why people will leave. But they will tell you it's because of money, because they don't want to say that their feelings were hurt or that they don't feel valued. So just something to keep in mind. Big myth: people, less than 20% of people will leave for funds. It's usually a promotion, more advancement, recognition. Yeah, that's why they leave.
It's interesting how much we miss the mark on that. Just treating people well can be the answer to so many of the obstacles that we put in front of ourselves. A little bit of recognition, a little bit of appreciation, for the employer out there. And I know of many. I mean, I talk to entrepreneurs all day that have the mindset of, the thing that I'm building wouldn't exist. The lifestyle that I have would not exist without every single one of my teammates, employees doing what they do. The employers that live in that mindset, their culture is often something to be desired. They have this bond. And same with the audience. Like when you're thinking about your customers, this whole thing that we're running wouldn't exist without them. So I'd like to think they believe we treat them well. We have pretty deep relationships with many of them. So it's getting out of that mindset of what can I take, focusing on myself all the time and focusing more, or at least balancing that out a little bit more to say, like, I wouldn't be living this life without all of these people. Maybe just a little respect, a little recognition, a little appreciation goes a long way is what I'm hearing from you.
Absolutely. You got it.
Yeah. Love it. Okay. Let's talk about you, Sue, outside of business. What puts a smile on your face? I know horses now, and I know your business does. Outside of those two things, when you're not working, what puts a smile on your face? What do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? I got a few things. So in addition to my horse, I've got 3 cats who had just decided that they were going to run around and have the zoomies. So that you may have heard some background noise. I apologize.
No problem.
And I also have a wonderful husband, and his job is around wine and food pairing. So I mean, come on, I lucked out on that. But I also I'm involved with one of the local Rotary groups here in Barrie, and I love working with them. In fact, just recently, I guess it was last week, the organization, the Rotary group that I belong to, Barrie Huronia Rotary, we had a big celebration luncheon and gave out $80,000 to our community members and partners and collaborators from just this one fundraising project that I'm involved with. So that's always fabulous. Putting a plug for Rotary, because there's a lot of good that gets done through all of the Rotary groups in the area. There's more than just Barrie Huronia. There's probably 4 others. And yeah, it's just amazing the partnerships that we have and the collaborations and the environmental support that we do in communities and here and internationally. It's a great thing to be part of. So that definitely fills my cup.
I love it. Animals. So do I know this husband that pairs wine with
He
food?
has been on a podcast. He was interviewed
Thought
with
so.
Sean a couple of weeks ago. So he's with Wine Journeys.
I was gonna say, as soon as you said that, I'm like, I think I know this person, but the last names I didn't put them together because they're a little different.
They are, yes.
Very cool. Yeah, he's been great. It's been great getting to know him. Just at this last networking event, I told him, I'm like, I don't know anything about wine. Like, can you teach me something? What am I drinking here? And to hear somebody, like when I know nothing about wine, I don't know that there's a lot to know about wine. Like you just don't know what you don't know. I'm not going to derail the conversation and start talking about your husband here, but hearing him go so deep on this one question, it was just fascinating. And that's something that it just constantly intrigues me about human beings is the depth of experience and passion and knowledge with a single topic. But just hearing how passionate they are about this, whatever topic it is that gets them going. I love seeing people itch that curiosity scratch. It is
Mm.
something that I think is fascinating about us humans. Okay, let's pivot a little bit. We'd like to start off with the playful question. So this question is about hardships. And why do we talk about them? I like to preface a little bit. Sometimes I go a little too long. Apparently, I'm a little verbose. So I'll try to dial it in. We talk about hardships because certainly in my world, when you do hard things, that's typically where the growth is. Like I could almost say that 100%. Maybe a handful of things that we shouldn't do that are hard that will result in something negative. But the vast majority of it, the way I look at the body growing physically, the mind growing, you could even say emotionally, spiritually, I have to do something that my body, that I'm not used to doing. Because if it's easy, I don't think the body and mind and spirit just grow from easy things. If I've done it 1,000 times before, it's going to be like there's no need to change. We have this incredible ability to adapt, but only if we put ourselves in this environment of adaptation, and that usually requires some level of discomfort or hardship. So
Yep.
that's what I look at it as. I have all my rules for life on my arm, and number 4 is do hard things. And then right below that is fear is your green light. Fear, I find to be certainly in the recovery world, our main roadblock. Like if you peel back the layers, you keep going down to the bottom of it, it's pretty much fear of something. And but that's where the growth comes from. That's where the beauty of life comes from. You can find out how capable you are. So when people go through these hard things, I think we still think of them often. I'm not going to share them because of ridicule or judgment, or it's a failure. And we pride ourselves in society on recognizing the winners, right? We love our athletes. We love our actors, all of these types of people that we deem are winning in some category of life. But I look at it this way: you're either winning or you're learning. Like I don't really use that word failure much anymore because I don't think it provides me value. And I would argue that winning feels great, but learning is really pushing you. And to do that learning part, you have to be going through something challenging. So whether it's a death or it's a test or it's some physical feat, the more we share that in my life, the more people that share the hardships they've gone through, and they are people that I look at as beacons for me to model myself after, I have learned over time that hardships are an integral ingredient to living a better life. So that's why we talk about them on the show. So is there an experience that you could share with us that you're comfortable with sharing with us that probably sucked in the moment? As we know the symptoms of hard, there's some level of pain or discomfort there, probably sucked in the moment. But now that when you look back on it in hindsight, you wouldn't remove that ingredient from the recipe that is you because it's led you to enjoying your life the way you do now. Something come to mind?
Oh gosh, trying to come up with one. I certainly have had my share of learning opportunities and personal growth opportunities, as I call them. I guess maybe one that I can share that's it's fairly common to a lot of folks was I had just launched my business about a year and a bit in, um, then COVID hit, and I didn't have a list of people to go to. I didn't have anything, I was still developing my products and services and what does this look like, and thinking about who I was going to serve, like who my target audience was. And as I mentioned earlier, when I first started out, having come from healthcare, I thought, well, healthcare is my focus because those are the people that I know. Those are my contacts. Those are, that the day to day that I understand really, really well. And it turns out that wasn't necessarily where the sweet spot was for my business. So during COVID, I was completely without income of any sort for the entire duration, and didn't qualify for any of the government assistance because of the way our business was set up and having no employees. And yeah, it was just, disaster after disaster. The government was announcing, oh, we've got a new grant, and it's like, oh, yay, and go through the criteria. It's like, yeah, and that disqualifies. And oh, the next one, oh yeah, no, that disqualifies. So basically, it was really tough. Like no income at all for those entire times, and so I was out on Zoom doing teaching and training on Zoom and speaking whenever I could to get the message out around how do we manage, how do we cope with all of this stress that's now come out of nowhere and the volatility and the uncertainty. So I was doing that, but I wasn't making money at it. And then when COVID started to lift, I realized I really needed to, actually before COVID lifted, I realized I needed to be broader in my target, which is the opposite of what everybody tells you. They tell you narrow in. And I found that I needed to broaden out. So I'm working now with all kinds of different types of business as a learning point. So focusing initially on those businesses that did well during COVID and had income and still needed to repair some of the damage of, what that did to our workforce. And how do we figure out hybrid, and how do we figure out work from home, and how do we figure out how do we build a team when we don't see each other. So that started to really build coming out of it. And more recently, I've been approached by some manufacturing, more of the light manufacturing organizations around stuff. And it's like, okay, that's another big learning curve because manufacturing is not part of my world experience. So how do I understand that industry and learn from it and grow and see where I can provide support in different areas of focus. So that's kind of the big piece that kind of, figure out how do we survive, and then what do we do coming out of it? What did we learn? What can I build on? What can I, the infamous P word, pivot.
Oh, I appreciate you sharing that story with us. I can only imagine what it would be like, that level of uncertainty, no income, nothing to depend on coming forward. Everything's a question mark, which I think we all know human beings don't love uncertainty too much. We love to know. We want to know. We want to plan, and I get it. There's a lot of value to that. So without me making assumptions, there's a couple of takeaways there, but rather than me listing them out, what was the learning through that? So you went through something very challenging. Other than learning that you survived it, that in itself, I think is quite valuable. It's like, wow, I went through this really brutal thing and I'm still here. So that's a win. But outside of that, what did those 3 years, it's a long time, what was the main takeaways for you?
I think that there really is a need for working through workplace stress. And it's not just as a result of the pandemic and what that's done to our workforce and our mental health, collective mental health. But also that when you keep giving and show up and do training sessions, people will remember you. So that was another thing, is that when you give back, even when there was, it was difficult to make it through, people still remember, oh, you did that session at the chamber or Georgian College or wherever, and it's like, yeah, that was it. It's like, little bits and pieces of stuff that I passed out, people were holding on to and saying, yes, this actually has helped me get through it. So very personally rewarding to know that the little bits and pieces that I was able to share actually did help and move, help people get through some of the challenges themselves too.
Love it. I love that story. Thank you for sharing that with us. Okay, moving towards the end of our show, our time together. This is my kind of secret question that I use
Uh-oh.
here and there, but it's one of my favorites. And I like to preface a little bit, provide some context that letting people know that there's really only a handful of things that I dive into in life in general, a handful of things that I practice, I study. I remember one of my mentors, she really had a huge impact on my life. She said at the beginning, just study broadly, find what you like. Don't go so deep on any one thing because you may be missing this great opportunity down the road. So study broadly, but over time, narrow your path because it's hard to get great at anything if you're studying surface level. So find the things that you like, make sure it feeds your curiosity and then go deep on those things. So mentorship is something I talk about all the time, entrepreneurship, impact and purpose and meaning, kind of all the same category, fitness and health, personal development, what we're capable of, human potential. And I think impact is kind of hub to all of those things. Like, what is our impact going to be? So she encouraged me to think about my impact. She basically told me very simply, you were born, you're going to die. What is going to be those in between points, like the hash, that little,
Dash.
the dash on your headstone, right? That's where all the meaning is, not those two dates. So she encouraged me to think about my impact up to the point when I first met her. I was 23 when I met her. Have you ever thought about your impact up to this point? The answer was no. No one's ever talked to me about impact. I'm 23 years old. But she was the first person to plant that seed as your time is very much out of your control. The time you are given, you have a level of control over it, but being given more time is greatly out of your hands. So, what are you going to do for today? Because tomorrow may not be here. What's your impact going to be for the day? Be intentional about it. And then for as long as you are here, what would you like your impact to be? So we're born, we're die. What do you want your impact on the world to be? And she taught me to think that broadly because she really taught me that we are all interconnected in some way, that the ripple effect of the work I do or don't do, it will go way beyond what I can see and am aware of. So she really taught me to think in this grand scale with these small little micro actions as an individual. So I like to ask the guests on the show, Sue, what would you like your impact to be?
Wow, love the question, and I love the setup. Particularly, it speaks so much to the time I was in palliative care. That really does hit home for me, and that was one of the things that, working in palliative care, it really made me focus in on take time to smell the roses, figuratively and literally. So my impact is really I want people to be happy and healthy in the work that they do. Um, having seen so many people in my career in leadership and colleagues and friends who maybe spent years, I know some of great physicians who hate their job, and think about it, that's a big career to spend your time training and preparing for, only to find out that you really don't like it at the end of it. um, yeah, that's tough. So my goal is, when I started seeing some of the statistics around long-term disability and short-term disability related to challenges in the workplace and the impact on that, it's ridiculous. Our whole societal, country, nationwide mental health could be improved so much if employers were more enlightened and more supportive in how they treat their staff. Don't treat them like they're disposable, because they're not. They're people. No matter what type of industry you're in, you know, there's a reason behind making sure that your staff are well, both from a moral, ethical point of view, which we think should be enough for people, but then there's also the bottom line, the profit. That if your workers are happy and productive, you're going to have fewer mistakes, fewer errors, um, and people will be much better off in staying and being fulfilled. So I'm blathering on. But that's the gist of it, is just kind of like pulling it together and and helping people be happy and healthy. We would save so much in our healthcare costs if we attacked it from the employee perspective. There's so many illnesses that have an underlying mental health component or a connection. People who are, recovering from heart disease, cardiovascular incidents, their impact of depression is significant. So the two are related, depression and cardiovascular disease. If we could address the workplace contributors to those stressors that lead to depression, cardiovascular disease would likely see a decrease. It's, people are a unit. There's not the mind and the body. They're actually two sides of the same coin. You take a dollar coin, it's got, the head of the monarchy on one side and the loon on the other. It's the same coin, same as our bodies and our health and our minds. So, work shouldn't make you sick. Workplace accidents, we just had a huge support on people getting hurt in the workplace, workplace deaths. It's the same thing on the mental health side of it. You really don't need to have work impact your mental well-being. So let's fix it. It's easy to fix.
I love it. So impact, from all that down into a couple of things, doing your part to make people as happy and as healthy as you can do. That's what I'm hearing for the impact.
Yeah, pretty much.
Awesome. I love it. It's a great mission, and we are on board with it. And I think it can have a great impact, especially the more people that hear that and decide, I want that to be my mission too. Get on board with that. Yeah. This is very positive ripple effect and can really make for some positive change. It's lovely, Sue. How can listeners connect with you? What's the best way to contact you?
Probably the best way is email. So it's Sue at communityhealthcareconsulting.ca. I'm on LinkedIn, Susan Carr, or Community Healthcare Consulting, and they're both personal and professional. Mm-hmm. Instagram, Sue Carr CHC, Twitter, Threads, Facebook, I'm there. If I can put a plug in for an upcoming session that we're doing, a number of us, there's 4 of us in this collaboration, are putting on a workshop at the Sandbox on unlocking, let me get the title correct, Unlocking Efficiency, learn how the science of mindfulness can boost productivity for you and your team. It is geared towards senior level decision makers in companies to learn mindfulness techniques that they can then use in their business and see how that type of training and that type of mindset will impact all of their leadership and supervisors to help make their workplace a better workplace, more productive and more connected. So that's happening on May the 14th at the Sandbox, and there is limited space, which is why we're sort of limiting it to just the senior decision makers in the organization to spend the day and learn some mindfulness activities.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, check that event out at the Sandbox, May 14th, you said. What time?
It's from 8:30 to 4:30. It is a full day.
Beautiful. And then anybody that wants to contact you got Facebook, did you say Twitter, Instagram, Threads, you got your email, LinkedIn,
Yep.
Look up Sue Carr, Community Healthcare Consulting, if you want to contact her. Sue, it's awesome having you on the show. I'm very happy I didn't ask these questions when I met you a week ago. I think what you do is meaningful work. I think everybody's work is meaningful, but I think there's a scale to meaningfulness. And I think your work can have a real impact on what we're doing out there. And it's just a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you. Love chatting with you, Jeff. Thank you.
Absolutely. You have a great day, Sue.
Bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Good Neighbor Podcast Midhurst. To nominate your favorite local businesses to be featured on the show, go to gnpmidhurst.com. That's gnpmidhurst.com or call 705-413-3775.